15, 20% of searches are now going to AI overview because zero click has been around a long time, but now AI overviews are huge. But in healthcare, it's like a third. So a lot of search traffic will never come back due to AI overviews. And I'm willing to spend 100 to make 500 is exceedingly rare in healthcare. It's very cost conscious. If you looked up healthcare marketing those days, we were number one, like worldwide. Anywhere I went, we were number one.
Stewart Gandolf, CEO at Healthcare Success Agency, started out with nothing but an idea and a laptop. No office, no team, just 40 clients and total chaos. Today, his agency leads the way in healthcare marketing and AI strategy. In this episode, Stewart takes us behind the scenes of what it really took to get here.
So content is not new. Offers and calls to actions are not new. This stuff's been around for decades. Most people don't know that. They think we all made this up. If you're new to this agency thing, just be ready to change and pivot like every year, at least every other year, because everything's going to be different in 2 years.
So for our young listeners today, what is the advice you'd want to give to them?
I'd say a couple things. One is
E-Coffee with Experts.
Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to your show E-Coffee with Experts. This is your host Ranmay here. And today we have Stewart Gandolf, who's the CEO of Healthcare Success Agency with us. Hey Stewart, how's it going?
Going good. I'm happy to be here. We finally got this together.
Absolutely, without any background noise.
Yeah.
Stewart, let's rewind a bit. Why don't you talk us through your journey thus far? How were you growing up as a kid? How did you land up in the digital marketing space? And also a bit about your agency. What are your core offerings? And we'll take it off from there.
Great. Well, let's first start and tell you what the agency is, just so people have a context. So we are a leading healthcare marketing agency. We work with larger businesses in that category, work with all kinds of healthcare verticals. That means especially multi-location providers, but we also work with hospitals and pharma, device, SaaS, telehealth, health plans. So a pretty broad array. But most of that revenue is from providers. And the other part of this is we were talking offline, it's truly integrated, meaning that we really do have brand strength. We really do have very strong digital strength. We were always known as a digital agency for many years, but over time we've grown these other categories, particularly branding and creative. So today, the great news there is that we can do everything. The bad news is that we can do everything. We talk about scaling later. Maybe I'll bring that up. So it's great to have we are, small compared to Ogilvy, but we're large compared to most independent agencies. And in our niche, we're, I don't know of anybody better. So I'm proud to say that. In terms of how we got here, it's a long, circuitous path. By the way, the company is almost 20 years old. So our 20th anniversary is next year. So it's crazy to think that it's been 20 years to get here. And I would say that, like you asked about origin story, so I once heard a comedian, what if everybody became what they wanted to be? So the world was filled with nurses and pilots and doctors and construction guys or whatever. So I wanted to be a pilot, and I thought I was going to be a pilot up until maybe about 10. In school, I was told I was good at science and math, so everybody said I should be an engineer or, get into healthcare. I had no interest in being a clinician. I thought I was just going to be an engineer. I actually was an undergrad in engineering and stumbled into an elective class in marketing, and it just captured my imagination. So I'm not sure why. And it's funny, I went back to my advisor and said, I want to switch majors. Like, that's dumb. Just stay as an engineer, then get your MBA and get marketing. Then you have both. I'm like, I'll never get an MBA. And of course, later I got an MBA. So that was good advice that I promptly learned. So it all worked out though. I get to own an agency and start an agency. So the marketing thing really was a lark. And the guy that was my mentor at that period was a national figure in marketing, which is probably why. He wrote the marketing textbooks. Everybody else in my classes, Ranmay, was, very dry, very boring. This is like years and years ago, decades ago. He had 3 screens with multimedia presentation. And it was just an exciting class. He brought it to life, which nobody else ever had done before. So it was a fun class. So anyway, that's how I did that. And then I started off in working in marketing on the client side. It's funny how life goes, Ranmay. I was on spring break in Florida, and I always thought I was going to move to Florida. I grew up in Ohio. And in about 10 minutes, my friend said, let's go to California. I'm like, okay. It's about as much thought as I gave it. I waited to graduate. They moved like the next month. So I graduated, came out here, worked on the client side, went to work for an agency. I don't know why I always wanted to work for an agency. I guess I saw agencies on TV. I thought they'd be cool. And went to work for a couple agencies, worked my way up to J. Walter Thompson. No offense to J. Walter Thompson, but I hated my time there. It was very political. It wasn't fun. Maybe it's just me. I don't know, but it wasn't great. Took a break from advertising, went to work in commercial real estate of all things, because my salespeople were making about 3 times the money as me with half the stress. I'm sure there are people that probably relate to that in your audience. Like the sales guy's got a cool car and I'm struggling. This isn't fun at all. And eventually I got recruited to work for a healthcare agency that worked with doctors. And this is way different than it is now. We were like the only company of any scale at all doing this. Like we worked our way up to about 100 people and we were doing project work. We basically had a newsletter, and then we upsold people from the newsletter to a seminar. Then we upsold them to agency services. So this was content marketing way before the internet was invented. So content marketing is not new. Offers and calls to actions are not new. This stuff's been around for decades. Most people don't know that. They think we all made this up. No. This has been around a long time. So anyway, that's kind of how this started. So I did that for about 10 years, became VP of marketing, thought I was going to be there for like a couple months, stayed and became VP of marketing, spoke around the country in hundreds of venues, left again, got bored, and I was doing internet stuff, which was fun. But I hated leaving all that experience on the table. Because by then, I'd worked with like 1,000 providers. I really, really, really knew this stuff. So started this company, and this is 2006. And the internet was, of course, around then. Google Ads was just becoming Google Ads, and we caught a wave. We immediately jumped to the top of Google organically. Like if you looked up healthcare marketing those days, we were number one, like worldwide. Anywhere I went, we were number one. It was really easy. So we were doing SEO very early on. I was going to the Google campus for meetings. We did paid search. We figured that out really quickly. So for many years, we were a digital agency. And then to kind of finish this up, we started off with a lot of projects. So that's kind of the origin story. And I think you had another question that I will lead you to the next part of that story.
Talking about that, what was the early version of healthcare success like? When you were starting out, through to clients to kind of explain the digital marketing landscape, to get them onboarded, to convince them to pay for marketing. How was it all like?
So, yeah, that's first of all, like we've mentioned, because we were early and we got inquiries a lot, like quickly. And we did a lot of things. Like I did a magazine, like Dental Economics is a publication. I wrote a column. We had a medical economics. I actually did audio CDs and we sold them and profit shared on those and sold like $100,000 worth of those. So we got going pretty quickly. That wasn't the challenge for us. We knew the audience, we had expertise. Selling wasn't the challenge. Administration and operations was the challenge. So if you were to ask me like what it was like, what worked and what didn't work, the selling part, we already had the experience. That wasn't as hard for us as you would think. But operating was hard because by nature, I had a partner then whom coincidentally I just talked to this morning for the first time in a while. But like my style was I just figure stuff out. Like I'm resourceful. And so we just kind of figured it out. Like, let's just go do this. Like, let's go jump off the building. We'll figure out how to fly on the way down. So this challenge was, I didn't think about operations at all. We didn't think about strategically at all. We got busy and we were doing a lot of project work at that point. So what I learned from this is, number one, scaling works, not scaling does not work. Forethought works, seat of the pants doesn't work. Hiring is really, really important. Choices based on friendship is not a good idea. So we did everything wrong in a way, but we still survived. So we ended up, I don't know how long it was, but probably in the first year, or certainly by the second year, we had about 40 clients doing a bunch of projects like all over the place. Wow. But there's all project work. So there's no recurring revenue there. And we had freelancers. It was all freelancers. It was my partner and me. And by the way, we were working virtually, which back then was like, nobody did that. Like we'd never had a server. We used Dropbox. We were one of the first early adopters of Dropbox and Basecamp. So they were around, but they weren't like they weren't like they are now. So we never had a server. We never had office space in the early days. We had all these freelancers running around. The challenge there was, if you have all these freelancers, you have to keep fishing, you have to keep swimming, right? You're like a shark who never stops swimming in order to survive. B, managing all those freelancers is really hard because they're not all on the same page. They all have their own way of doing things. We made a terrible mistake of going to hourly. We used to do it on a project basis and they would take the risk of doing it. And we said, let's do it hourly, and we got killed. And then we had very weak accounting. And so suddenly it turned out we owed like $500,000 worth of work that we'd already been paid for. So that wasn't fun. So we did a couple of years in those early days of not taking a check, but we eventually started figuring stuff out. Today, I think it's a lot easier, Ranmay. The model of starting a digital agency, you can read about how to do this more. You can listen to podcasts with me telling you don't do it this way. So it's a little easier to avoid those things. Back then we had the marketing smarts. We just didn't have how to run an agency smarts, which is a lot more accessible today. There's lots of consultants and people out there, but it really does matter. I mean, scaling matters, niching matters, the strategy matters. Um, one of the things, a friend of mine's, Corey Quinn, has a agency specialization podcast, and he talks a lot about that. And it's like, not only is selling easier, but operating is easier, right? If you narrow your niche to plumbers and you just do pay-per-click, it's easy to get really good at it. If you decide you're going to do everything for everybody, that's going to be really difficult. So that would be some of the, I don't know, lessons learned from those early years is, again, just to think about scaling a lot, think about taking steps, and as brutal as it is, turning down work that doesn't fit. Like we would do TV commercials. We can do TV commercials to this day, but we're set up for it. Back then, I would be off on the video shoot, right? And it all turned out okay, but man, that's a hard way to go. It really helps a lot to have a niche, have a specialization, and do it really well so you can scale.
Absolutely. It's I mean, you have been in this space for quite some time and would have met a lot of business owners, right? What are some of the common misconceptions does healthcare business owners have around marketing in general?
So there's a lot, and it's funny when you think about it. Number one, and this is something we talk about a lot, is that most, I'll make it easy because healthcare is so broad. It's much broader. And again, I'm not talking about individual doctor practices here. I'm talking about, to pick a niche, like one we work in a lot, which is multi-location providers, which could be a health system. It could be like a specialty practice like dermatology or gastroenterology or whatever. The biggest thing I see is that, especially when they get to that size, they are professionally run. They have a CEO. They may have a marketing person or department. It's much different than like an individual dentist or whatever. They're thinking about business a lot. They're thinking about scaling. But the one thing they underestimate typically is the power of marketing. Sometimes they just don't have any experience with it. They don't understand that it could really be an extra level driver. So in the world of healthcare, they talk a lot about is revenue cycle management. How do we get paid quickly, on time, get paid for what we're doing? That's a big deal, as it should be. But the idea of growing the business through marketing is something they don't usually think about. The second thing that I worry about a lot is that, when people come to us, some of the ones, it's gotten better, but still, even larger organizations still often don't understand the HIPAA implications, which is, a privacy act here in the States of, like, for example, there is a tracking technologies, Facebook Pixel, you just can't use unless you work around it. Google Analytics, you can't use. Google will tell you, don't use Google Analytics for healthcare. So, most people don't know that. And there are agencies doing all this stuff without having a clue, and they're putting their clients in great jeopardy if they're a provider. So like that's a blind spot. Another thing is tech stack. We'll talk about tech, I think, a little bit later, is really important. And finally, this may sound crazy to Ranmay, but the idea that, I'm willing to spend 100 to make 500 is exceedingly rare in healthcare. It's very cost conscious. So they tend to think a lot more about what they're spending versus what they can make. And the ROI, which is much more obvious in other industries, is not necessarily implicit in healthcare. They really have a hard time, not all of them, obviously, not our clients, obviously, but certainly a lot just have the hardest time investing anything in marketing. And I get it because, if they were able to build the business without marketing, it doesn't seem like there's a need, but that doesn't mean there's not even more opportunity, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, you did mention about podcasting, and then the earlier talk that we had. How powerful do you think podcast, as a source is for long form content body in today's, and building affinity and trust and high consideration, industries like healthcare?
So we have our own podcast, obviously. And if your listeners are interested, they just go to healthcaresuccess.com/podcast. I love podcasting. We've been doing podcasting since about 2010 or 2011. We were early in. We were really early in. We were too early in.
Early to everything, yeah.
So what I did back in those days was we would do it sort of in like seasons, especially like around a conference. We would podcast and interview like speakers, and we would do it as sort of like an enhanced blog. So we did a blog since the very first day. I started a blog the first day. Again, we were doing content marketing before that word was invented, or at least before I was aware of it. But the podcast for us back in the early days was like an enhanced blog. I don't know, a year and a half or two ago, I recommitted to it. I doubled down because we've been doing it for years, but I decided I was going to go weekly and really commit to it in a bigger way than just sort of seasonal. And I love it. I've always loved it. The relationships I've built in my career have been great for that. So if you're just getting started, it's like number one, it does help to have some expertise in something, right? You can fake it till you make it, but it's better to have some expertise. You'll get better guests and you'll have a better podcast. But like we have gotten business directly from the podcast for sure, but it's really good at building relationships with people over time. So it's hard when you're just getting started. I don't know how many of your audience are relatively young agencies and sort of just getting started a year or two. It's really hard when you're struggling like that to have a long-term outlook. It was for us. Like it was like thinking about the next day. But if you're in it to win it for the long term, those relationships you can build through podcasting are huge. And then, the brand sort of image, like a lot of times when we get called constantly, this is not a secret, my team knows this, we get called a lot if we want to buy our agency. And almost always the thought leadership is a big part of that. So it's adding like a sort of added layer of value to the company that's hard to pin, but it's real. So I think it's a fantastic long-term investment in your business if you can do it and commit to it.
Lovely. Yeah, I mean, it is also very good from perspective of building your own brand, right? And also, like you said, make some great relations, which otherwise, becomes a challenge because there is only limited number of conferences or physical meetups that you can do in a year, right? And considering an agency life, podcast is a brilliant way to, kind of connect with people across the globe, understand their business model, understand, how they have actually scaled, what is their journey. It's a brilliant, branding, marketing tool. And obviously, like you mentioned, if you close clients through it, nothing like it.
I have an interview later today for my podcast, and this is somebody I've known of for a long time. I just hadn't, for whatever reason, never met her. She's great. I was introduced to her by another podcast guest and friend. And even like some of the people I met, like, for example, at a conference years ago, I saw them speak, like them. I invited to be on the podcast and other personal friends. And those friendships have related beyond the fact that it's a personal friendship. It just introduces me to more people. But it is a long-term play, Ramnay. It's not like you do it right away. You've got to be committed. And if you're just struggling to get clients, it's probably not the best focus of your time right now. But as you mature a little bit, it's great.
Absolutely. Now, finally, Stewart, what is your take on AI and healthcare marketing? Where do you feel is, where it can be leveraged, and what do you feel is the danger zone there?
So with AI, first of all, to me, this is the most exciting time in marketing since I started. Like when I first started, it's hard to imagine this. It had been around, but paid search was pretty new. It was very immature. Like they first brought out the concept of quality score back when I was doing this. And so, up until then, it was just an auction, who would pay the most. But Google figured that out. And then SEO was, still developing. You'd have a huge advantage over competitors if you had title tags, for example. Nobody had that. So that was a very exciting time. And then, it matured. It kind of grew over time. Call tracking was new at the time. That was also super exciting. That was a big deal. So now it's been like growing slowly, over time and getting better and better. But AI changes everything. So for example, AI-based tracking, where you don't have to listen to thousands of calls. You can have the AI summarize it for you. That's enormously powerful. AI bots that can answer the call, because in healthcare, they can't answer their damn phone half the time. So like having bots that can answer the phone credibly, that's an evolving technology. That's enormously exciting. Everybody talks about, writing, which is, we use it for more ideation than writing. We still have humans writing and pretty committed to that, but it's good for ideation. Obviously, there's things you can do if you're scaling ads. Those are all like sort of tactical things. But I would say the most important thing right now that we're facing is in AI overviews, if you're following SEO, AI overviews in particular have dramatically changed search, dramatically. ChatGPT matters, but ChatGPT's market share is still small. It's outsourced, but it's like a couple percent. AI overviews on Google are much more important. Some of the data that we publish that we're sharing with other people that study this stuff to death, 15, 20% of searches are now going to AI overview, because zero click has been around a long time, but now AI overviews are huge. But in healthcare, it's like a third. So a lot of search traffic will never come back due to AI overviews. And so that's going to continue to evolve. Google announced at their conference a couple of months ago that they're going to start integrating ads with the AI overviews. That is fundamentally changing. today, if we're going to focus anywhere, and you and I talked about this a little offline, it used to be, we would focus on all the things with SEO, as of course we should, beyond technical and content, which was the lion's share of what we were doing, things like digital PR, things like reputation, things like building your brand offline and thought leadership are much more important. Not very long ago, having a presence on LinkedIn was like, it's nice. Now it's going to be really, really important. Like having a true brand mentions is very important. Like back in the earlier days with Google, for example, it was really easy to be an interloper and just, be very small and own the first page. And now Google favors brands. So it's harder for the little guy to get traction. So there's a lot going on. But I think broadly speaking, it's super exciting. And if I can just add one more thing to that, and then in terms of our industry, there are companies that understand marketing better. They understand AI, they understand ROI. And so, especially in telehealth, they're coming in and taking pieces of the market that traditional players just didn't see. So there's a combination of like the AI changing everything, and then you've got disruptors coming in the market. So it's a little scary, but it's also, to me, it's super exciting. Like we're all here 20 years later because we keep adapting. By the way, if you're new to this agency thing, just be ready to change and pivot like every year, at least every other year, because everything's going to be different in 2 years. It just does. And that's why we're still here, as we kept doing that, which I like. Most people don't, but if you're going to be in the agency world, it's going to change. You can count on it. So,
absolutely. Well, this has been a brilliant, insightful conversation. But before we let you go, you have clearly spent a couple of decades now and have really made it big in this particular space. So for our young listeners today, what is the advice you would want to give to them?
I think that's a great question. I would say in this world we're in right now, and I get it because I was there, right? So I'm not trying to say anything that I don't understand, but I'd say a couple things. One is invest on yourself and continuing education constantly. So like when I was doing this, back in the early days, I'd go to personal development seminars. I went to Tony Robbins. I read different books. I listened to a bunch of different tapes. This is all broadly available and free now, and it's a lot easier. So you're learning about the personal development side as well as the technical side of what you do, and just be absolutely excellent at that. And I would say pick a niche as well, because if you're trying to, I know it's fun. If you're trying to work with a bank, then a plumbing supply company, then a this and a that, but it's really hard to scale. So I would say niche. And just work to be absolutely excellent at what you do. Invest the time. I know you're tired. I know it's hard. But you'll start developing, especially if you niche and especially if you continually study, you'll have insights that other people don't. And when I was, especially in healthcare for us, like really understanding this stuff, I can build credibility in about 2 minutes. And that really helps. It doesn't mean everybody hires us, but credibility really matters, certainly in healthcare, but in most specialties. So if you really know your stuff, so in our culture today, the challenge is everybody wants to be an influencer, but not everybody's willing to put the time in to have the goods. I mean, it's one thing if you're doing it on Instagram and you're super attractive looking and, it's easy for you. Well, that's Instagram. But if you're trying to make it in business, it's really helpful to know your stuff. I mean, to really know it. That'd be my best advice. Seriously.
Lovely. Great, Stewart. Thank you so much for taking our time to do this with us. Really appreciate it, man.
Great. Nice talking to you. Thank you.